Hello everyone, welcome to the Langfocus channel and my name is Paul. Today we'll be answering the question, how similar are German and Dutch? Wait, what were those two languages again? German,
Deutsch,
Dutch,
Nederlands,
Vlaams,
Deutsch,
Isn't it strange that English speakers call the language of the Netherlands and Flanders Dutch, while German speakers call their own language Deutsch? Why is that? It's because there's a connection between Dutch and German. Both are Germanic. The English word Dutch used to refer to continental Germanic peoples in general, but then came to refer to only the people of the Netherlands because of greater contact and rivalry with them in particular. The English word comes from the Middle Dutch word Duits, and in modern Dutch,
Duits,
which means German. And this is a cognate of the German word
Deutsch,
and with that, we've already begun comparing the two languages. In Dutch, they say,
Duits,
and in German, they say.
Deutsch,
Germanic and Dutch are both members of the West Germanic branch of the Germanic language family. Both developed from the same root, the same ancestor language, Proto-Germanic, which developed into Western, Eastern, and Northern dialect groups. The Western dialects are the ancestors of Dutch and German, and the other West Germanic languages. One thing we have to keep in mind when comparing Dutch and German is that there are many dialects of Dutch, and there are many dialects of German. And in northern Germany and parts of Netherlands, there are dialects that arguably form another language, Low German or Low Saxon. And there's another regional language called Frisian. But speakers of all of these dialects learn either Standard Dutch or Standard German depending on which country they live in. So there may be cases when German and Dutch speakers understand each other more easily when their dialects are closer to each other, but there are other situations in which their dialects are further apart and it would be easiest to communicate in the standard languages. In this video, I'll focus on Standard Dutch and Standard German. Vocabulary. Dutch and German share a large amount of cognate vocabulary. According to one source I've seen, their lexical similarity is around 84%, which is slightly lower than Spanish and Italian or Spanish and Portuguese. 84% lexical similarity doesn't mean that 84% of the words are exactly the same, it means that they are cognates. They come from a common origin, but they may have a different form or be pronounced differently. Some examples. The word for glass, in German,
Glas,
and in Dutch.
glas,
The word for water, in German,
Wasser,
and in Dutch.
water,
The word for dog,
Hund,
hond,
the word for brother.
Bruder,
broeder,
But this here is actually an archaic form of the word. The modern form of the word is
broer,
the word for sister.
Schwester,
zuster,
This is also an archaic form. The modern form is,
zus,
and here are a couple of phrases. Good morning,
Guten Morgen,
goedemorgen,
good day or good afternoon.
Guten Tag,
goedendag,
It's sunny.
es ist sonnig,
het is zonnig.
There are a lot of cognates like that, but there are false cognates as well. In Dutch,
Zee,
means sea, and
meer,
means lake. In German,
See,
means lake, and
Meer,
means sea. But there's actually a bit more to it than that. There's actually a masculine word,
der See,
meaning lake, and a feminine word,
die See,
meaning sea. In Dutch,
liegen,
means to lie, as in to tell a lie. In German,
liegen,
means to lie, as in to lie down on a bed, for example. In Dutch,
liggen,
means to lie on something, like a bed. In German,
lügen,
means to tell a lie. In Dutch,
pijnlijk,
means painful, but in German,
peinlich,
normally means embarrassing. In Dutch,
mogen,
means be allowed to, and in German,
mögen,
means to like. But hold on a second, the Dutch word can also be used with the meaning to like, specifically when you like a person. The German word is used more generally for people or things you like. So even though a lot of cognates may be obvious or easy to decipher, assuming that they mean the same thing might cause some confusion. Pronunciation. I'm sure you noticed that most of those cognate words sounded a little different, and some of them sounded quite different. One of the biggest differences between Dutch and German is the different sounds in either language, and how these result in cognate words that sound different. Some of the differences between Dutch and German are a result of the High German consonant shift, which took place in the few hundred years leading up to the 9th century. German descends from dialects that were affected by these changes, while Dutch descends from dialects that were not affected by these changes. Because of the shift, voiceless stops, p, t, and k in Dutch tend to be fricatives, f, s, and ch, in German cognates, when between vowels or after a vowel at the end of a word. For example, the words meaning ship, in Dutch,
schip,
and in German,
Schiff,
and the words meaning water, in Dutch,
water,
and in German,
Wasser,
and the pronoun meaning I, in Dutch,
ik,
and in German.
ich,
These same voiceless stops became affricates, pf, ts, or kh, at the beginning of a word, or if they were doubled consonants, or if they came after an L or R sound. For example, the words for apple, in Dutch,
appel,
and in German,
Apfel,
and the words meaning heart, in Dutch,
hart,
and in German.
Herz,
The third change, k, changing to kh, occurred only in Upper German dialects and not in Standard German. Another shift also took place in the voiced stops, b, d, and g, which became voiceless, p, t, and k, but with only the d to t shift taking place in Standard German. The other changes only took place in Upper German dialects. For example, the word for day, in Dutch,
dag,
and in German.
Tag,
Remember before when I said that certain German speakers would have an easier time understanding Dutch because of their dialects? Well, that's especially true for Low German dialects because, like Dutch, they didn't undergo this High Germanic consonant shift. There was another sound change that affected High German, but also Low German and Dutch. Th and the became d. This explains why German still has a d sound, even though there was an earlier shift from d to t. There are also other sound differences that are not a result of the High Germanic consonant shift. Notice the different g sounds in the word for God, in Dutch,
God,
and in German.
Gott,
The German g is more or less like the English g. The Dutch sound varies depending on the region, but is a velar or uvular fricative. You may have also noticed that the W sounded different in the words for water. So let's hear those again, in Dutch
water,
and in German.
Wasser,
The German sound is similar to the V sound in English. The Dutch W is pronounced differently. In the beginning or in the middle of the word, it's sort of between a V and a W sound. But at the end of a word, after a vowel, it's a glide, just like W in English. R sounds. R sounds vary quite a lot in either language, depending on where the speaker's from. But they're often different in either language. For example, the word for year, in Dutch
jaar,
and in German.
Ja,
In the Dutch word, the final R sounds like a retroflex approximant,
Ra,
like in some varieties of English, but other speakers say it as a trilled R. And when it's not at the end of the word, the trilled R is more consistently used, especially in northern areas. And in the German word, the R is pronounced as a vowel. It's also pronounced as a vowel in some other contexts, like between vowels, or after a long vowel and before another consonant. In other contexts, it's more like a voiced uvular fricative,
Ra,
at least in a standard accent of Germany. Here's another example using the words meaning rough. In Dutch,
ruw,
here you can clearly hear the trilled R. And in German,
Rau,
some consonants are spelled the same but sound different, some are spelled differently and sound different, and others are spelled differently but sound the same. One example is that Z is spelled as Z in Dutch, but as S in German. German S is also pronounced S at the end of a word or after consonants other than L and nasals. Two words we saw earlier are German
Sonnig,
and Dutch.
zonnig,
There are many differences in vowels as well. Some are spelled differently but sound basically the same, like the words meaning year that we saw a minute ago. Let's hear those again and focus on the vowel. In Dutch
jaar,
and in German.
Ja,
Notice that the vowel is spelled differently. Another example, the words meaning good. In Dutch
goed,
and in German.
gut,
There are also a lot of pairs of cognates in which the vowel sounds have become different, and that is reflected in their spelling. For example, the words for dream. In Dutch
droom,
and in German.
Traum,
A long O vowel in Dutch often corresponds with this diphthong in German. The words meaning body, but cognate with the English word life. In Dutch
lijf,
and in German.
Leib,
These diphthongs often correspond with each other. Another similar example is the word for bite, in Dutch
bijten,
and in German.
Beißen,
Also, notice this German letter that represents the sound S. after long vowels or diphthongs, as opposed to double S after short vowels. This orthographic symbol doesn't exist in Dutch. In Dutch, S is always represented by a single S. And it's worth noting that this symbol is not used in Swiss Standard German either. They always write it as a double S. Grammar. There are some important similarities and some important differences between the grammar of the two languages. One difference is their use of grammatical gender. German has 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, which apply to nouns, their articles, and adjectives that modify them. Dutch historically had the same 3 genders, but in practice in modern Dutch, masculine and feminine essentially form a single common gender. So the only grammatical distinction is between common gender and neuter. And related to that, German has 3 definite articles, while Dutch has 2. And for indefinite articles, German has just 2 and Dutch has just 1. Another difference is that German has noun cases, different forms of nouns depending on their function in the sentence. The 4 cases in German are nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. Dutch used to have noun cases, but they fell out of use in the spoken language, and in the 1940s they were dropped from the standard language. Now they appear in some older idioms, but that's about it. That lack of noun cases arguably makes Dutch easier to learn than German, at least in that particular way. Oh, and remember a minute ago when I said that German has 3 definite articles? Well, it's actually not that simple. Each definite article has some variations depending on the noun's case. Let's look at the nominative and accusative cases, just to illustrate. These sentences mean, the red fish is expensive. In German,
Der rote Fisch ist teuer.
and in Dutch.
De rode vis is duur.
As you can see, these sentences can be translated word for word from English. The function of the phrases meaning the red fish is nominative, because that's the subject of either sentence. These sentences mean, I like the red fish. In German,
Ich mag den roten Fisch.
and in Dutch.
Ik hou van de rode vis.
Here, the phrases meaning the red fish are the direct object, which means their function is accusative. You can see that in Dutch, the noun phrase stays the same, despite its accusative function in the sentence. But in German, the accusative form is different. The noun itself doesn't have a special ending. That's different depending on the gender and the case, but the definite article changes and the adjective has a special ending. When you consider the different case forms for nouns, articles, and adjectives, there are a lot of possible combinations. These are for definite noun phrases. And these are for indefinite noun phrases. Learning the different case forms is a challenge for learners of German, but if you learn Dutch, you don't have to memorize all those different forms and endings, which affect nouns, adjectives, articles, and possessives, etc. Word order. In the sentence we just saw, the word order was essentially the same in both languages, and both were the same as in English. In the following sentences, they share the same syntax, but they're different from English. These sentences mean, I can play the piano very well. In German,
Ich kann sehr gut Klavier spielen.
and in Dutch.
Ik kan heel goed piano spelen.
Word for word, both sentences are, I can very good piano play. In both sentences, the conjugated verb, an auxiliary verb, comes second, after the subject. Both languages feature V2 word order, and in both languages, the unconjugated verb moves to the end. For clarity, let's simplify those previous sentences by removing the adverb phrase. So now they mean, I can play the piano. In German,
Ich kann Klavier spielen.
and in Dutch.
Ik kan piano spelen.
Now let's add something so that they mean, I want to be able to play the piano. In German,
Ich möchte Klavier spielen können.
word for word it's, I want, piano, play, be able to. And in Dutch,
Ik wil piano kunnen spelen.
word for word it's, I want, piano, be able to, play. In Dutch, when another auxiliary verb is added, this auxiliary verb
Kunnen.
gets moved back, but the main lexical verb is still at the end. In German, the equivalent auxiliary verb gets moved to the end, after the lexical verb. This same difference occurs in relative clauses. These sentences mean, he knows that I can play the piano. In German,
Weiß, dass ich Klavier spielen kann.
word for word it's, he knows that I piano play can. And in Dutch,
Hij weet dat ik piano kan spelen.
word for word it's, he knows that I piano can play. So while the word order is generally similar, there are some differences in the details like that. Let's look at one more final sentence and see what we find. Let's compare 2 sentences meaning, if I had enough money, I'd buy a car. First, in Dutch.
Als ik genoeg geld had, zou ik een auto kopen.
Word for word it's, if I enough money had, would I a car buy. Next, in German.
Wenn ich genug Geld hätte, würde ich mir ein Auto kaufen.
Word for word it's, if I enough money had, would I myself a car buy. These are both conditional sentences with two clauses, an if clause and a main clause. First, you might notice that even though I said both languages have V2 word order, neither of these sentences seem to have verbs in the second position. In the first clause, the verb comes last, and in the second clause, the verb comes first. Well, this here is the main clause, or independent clause, so we should focus on this when thinking about V2 word order. If this clause alone were the entire sentence, then the subject would come first and the verb would come second, making it V2 word order. This here is the dependent clause. In other words, it's not a sentence by itself, it only adds information to the main clause. So this whole dependent clause occupies the first position, and in the main clause, the verb moves before the subject to occupy second position, making it V2 word order. First, we can see that the words for if are different. Then we have the slightly different cognates, meaning I. Here we have cognate words meaning enough. Notice that the vowels sound the same but are spelled differently. And notice that the letter G looks the same but sounds different. In Dutch, the G sounds are uvular fricatives.
Ha.
Next, we have the cognate words for money. The next word is an important one. In Dutch, this if clause simply has the past tense form of the verb
Hebben.
meaning to have. In German, however, this is a subjunctive verb form, something that Dutch doesn't have. Subjunctive forms are used to express hypothetical situations, express doubt, or express something you wish were true. Next, we see the auxiliary verbs in the main clause, which both translate as would. The German word is the past subjunctive form of
Werden,
and the Dutch word is the past tense of,
Zullen.
which, by the way, is a cognate of the English word shall. Notice that in German, there's an extra word here. This word is a reflexive pronoun, which is used to show that you are buying something for yourself. This is the dative form of the first-person singular pronoun. This is not completely necessary, but is commonly used in this context. In Standard Dutch, the reflexive pronoun is not used here. Next, we have the indefinite articles, which are cognates. The German one, though, is the neuter accusative form, while in Dutch, there's only one form of the indefinite article. Next, the word for car is similar. The Dutch word is in the common gender, in other words, historically masculine or feminine. The German word is neuter gender and in the accusative form, but this form takes no special ending to distinguish it. For some genders and cases it does, and for others it doesn't. Finally, we see the word for buy.
Kopen.
In Dutch,
kaufen.
in German. The German consonant sound f is a result of the High Germanic consonant shift that we talked about earlier. And also notice the different vowel sound. There are a lot of similarities between those two sentences we just looked at, but there are also a lot of differences, probably enough for you to realize that, to a large extent, German and Dutch are not mutually intelligible for people who haven't been exposed to the other very much. Words in isolation or short phrases might be mutually intelligible, but when mixed in with different words and when spoken at full speed, it becomes much harder. And just like with other pairs of closely related languages, speakers of Dutch and German often say that they can understand the other language much more in its written form than in its spoken form. And like I said earlier in the video, speakers of certain dialects might have a much easier time understanding the other language. The question of the day, for native speakers of Dutch or German, how well do you understand the other language? And if you've ever studied the other language, what was your experience like? And for other people, after seeing the examples in this video, what's your impression of Dutch and German? Do they seem very similar to you? Be sure to follow Langfocus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And once again, thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, especially these amazing people right here on the screen. They are my top-tier Patreon supporters. So many special thanks to them. And to everyone else, thank you for watching and have a nice day.